Alright everyone, we obviously start off today with another update with regards to the classified documents that were being improperly stored by Biden and his people. The big cope is, of course, Biden didn't know they were there. Everything's fine, bro. I see a lot of cope from the legacy media. Most of it boils down to, well, there weren't that many documents found here. Well, what's in the documents? That is more meaningful than the fact that they were there, I would think. Some top-level document involving high-level secrets is a little more concerning than something that's just a low-level report on the emissions released from the Abrams tank or something like that. Classified doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. Anything can basically be classified by some agency, by an executive, etc. That's really not the point. The legacy media is acting like it's the number, the quantity, as opposed to the quality of the documents. The cope goes a lot further, though. For instance, they're like, well, Donald Trump was keeping his documents. He knew he had them. He knew that it was wrong, and he wasn't cooperating with the National Archives. Actually, some of Biden's staff were blaming the National Archives the other day. Just to be clear about the trajectory of this particular scandal. I would note that, and I'll always do this when I'm covering any update with regards to this, there is a difference between the Mar-a-Lago raid / Trump documents and the non-raid of Biden's Delaware residence, UPenn, etc. Potentially more to come. That remains to be seen between those two and the documents there. Yes, there were less of them. That is not particularly meaningful because, of course, you don't know what all of these documents are. Again, there's a difference between any two classified documents, and the public would react differently with regards to their actual content. I would note that the difference number one is the legacy media response. That one's low-hanging fruit. It's obvious. They're red in the face about Trump and saying he's a traitor. With Biden, they generally give him a pass, although they are preemptively setting up to potentially throw him under the bus again. I do sense shenanigans with this story. I can elaborate as well. The second difference is that Donald Trump knew the documents were there, openly coordinated with members of the standing U.S. government, the stewardship, with regards to securing them. They were in a locked room. They were not given, access was not given to them by people who weren't supposed to have access to the documents. The original FBI summation with regards to the documents points out the fact that it does not appear that they were shared with anyone in an untoward manner. They were in one location. It was behind a lock. Donald Trump installed a second lock, actually, at the behest of the reigning stewardship, and then subsequently was working with the archives until they decided, under the auspices of Biden's command, actually, that enough was enough. We're taking these documents back. But they were in a locked room. There's no evidence anyone gained access to them, etc., etc. And Trump knew that they were there, and he happened to be president when he took the documents, meaning he can declassify them. That's an ongoing sort of story. Joe Biden was not the president, could not declassify. They were in unsecure locations, and we may never know whether anyone who wasn't supposed to see them gained access to them. We have not necessarily a clue. Is there a camera in the room at UPenn where these documents were stored? Was there a camera at Biden's Delaware home in the garage next to his Corvette? Maybe some sort of private security system. You got to understand, once he became President Biden, you would think there'd probably be a Secret Service or other security presence at his private home in Delaware. That's fine. But the documents were there before that, when he was not in office at all. He had been a former vice president. He hadn't yet run for office again. The documents may very well have been unsecure in his garage. Now we find there's a separate location. And they found an additional classified document at a different point inside of his home. Then we found the other day that they found 5 additional documents at that same location. So now we're up from the original 5 to an additional 6 documents in 2 different locations, again, in a place that was not particularly secure until the last couple of years, and is sporadically used. Well, Biden goes back home to Delaware constantly, but for 4 or 5 days out of the week, it's not as secure. Thankfully, it's only a stone's throw from D.C. The poor man doesn't have to fly very far in order to get to his bike trails and his bran muffin for the afternoon. There are definitely differences between the two stories. But the difference is the way they're being discussed and cast by the legacy media, by Karine Jean-Pierre, Biden doesn't really want to weigh in, but by his staff, is just a giant pile of cope. This leads me to believe that there are shenanigans afoot. Now that we've got an additional group of documents, doesn't it seem a little bit like, I'll posit this for you, since the strategy works so well. The NSA leaks had this aspect, the slow dripping of new information. What you're doing is you're trying to create a narrative that is problematic enough so that the person has to weigh in on the narrative, and then you can produce additional material, additional evidence that their response initially was a lie. It's very damaging. We've had this with the Twitter files. The Twitter files were very wisely released in such a way that you're slow dripping. You force an FBI response, you force a White House response, you force a response by Craptoids, etc., and then you destroy them because you show that at least part of what they're saying as their initial defense is not actually defense at all, that what they're saying is a lie, or at the very least it's misleading. It's not factual in its entirety. Why does it seem like the trajectory of what we're seeing here is basically the same? Day after day, it keeps getting worse in that same sense. Now, you can chalk that up to, well, Biden's attorneys just need time to be able to go through every goddamn paper at his house, at UPenn, at unspecified potential additional locations. Who fucking knows? It could be Hunter Biden's crack shack. Maybe there's classified documents there that he rolled up and smoked at one point with a couple of Russian hookers. That's possible too. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if in the next week, in the next main news cycle, you get additional updates that paint a picture that's even worse than just a handful of documents in a couple of locations. But don't worry too much, everyone. They're probably nothing. We're not sure what they are, but we're just going to preemptively assume that there's nothing actionable, nothing particularly meaningful in there. And Merrick Garland, posting a special counsel to look into the proceedings, is specifically pertinent to these two groups of documents, limiting them from going further than that, you'll note, which means that you might find a stack of 100 classified documents in a warehouse locker room at some point. Oh yeah, Hunter left these here. Yeah, it was okay. That's the other glaring point. In Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago documents, the declassified material, which is what he's declaring it, having been president when he took them, that is a potential legal defense, just to be clear, at least with regards to the Espionage Act side, not necessarily to the non-criminal, but nonetheless worrisome data retention laws a la the National Archives. Those are two entirely separate things that we have to discuss. Those documents were behind a locked door in a building that had both private security and Secret Service presence at all times. There was no such presence in Biden's garage. Hunter wandered in there on a regular basis and fooled around, and apparently was listed as the one that owned the home in the first place at that time. That's worrisome, because around that time he was smoking crack and doing crazy shit and leaving behind all of his personal information at a computer repair store. Is it possible? Can we please ask the elephant in the room question? Is it at least possible that Hunter Biden saw these documents and said, hey, bet I could make some money off of these? I hear a lot about Jared Kushner's Saudi Arabia deal and how it must tie into the documents that were at the Mar-a-Lago, despite FBI investigation evidence to the contrary. By the way, when the FBI is saying Trump never did shit with these documents other than look at them and imagine the good old days, basically, he's keeping them as trophies, the FBI is not necessarily the biggest friend to Trump and to his inner staff. Now we've got the new term, minted by Roger Stone the other day, CAR-A-LAGO, to describe the garage documents here. Yeah, that's a good linguistic kill shot. I would run with it. We should definitely be pushing CAR-A-LAGO as a part of the story. But don't be surprised if shenanigans are afoot. Again, my speculation is, and as of yesterday's drop, I think that the chance is slowly growing that this is what they're doing. Force Biden out while damaging Trump through comparison with what Biden's doing. Make it a big goddamn shit show, which the Republicans will spring on, and there will be bipartisan support to tie up the Presidential Records Act, to tie up the power of the National Archives, etc., to look into these cases as a sort of holistic thing, even though it is apples to oranges. They're both fruits, but they're not the same fruit. Just to be clear, you bite into a banana and you taste apple, and you're like, what the fuck did I just eat? Despite that fact, I speculate that they'll dovetail the two together. They'll try to prevent Biden from running again, which has been their goal anyway. They don't want an 83-year-old man who literally cannot campaign to be their standard bearer. It would boggle the mind if he won. It would be very difficult to honk in such a situation. Maybe they want Hakeem Jeffries. Maybe they want Gavin Newsom. Maybe they want Pritzker or something like that. And number two, to use it to damage Donald Trump. Well, he did worse than Biden. We just forced... Biden's not deciding to run. He's decided he stepped down. He was rebuked. He was impeached or whatever. Why isn't Trump facing charges right now? He did so much worse. Shame on Merrick Garland. They'll throw Garland under the bus too before the end. I think they're frustrated with him being somehow less reluctant than them to weaponize the DOJ. You're going pretty far when an already hyper-weaponized bureau is being chastised for not being weaponized enough. It's sort of like, you're acting like Mussolini. How dare you? You're supposed to act like Joseph Stalin. That's about all. Peace out.